I'm joined now by Cameron Teague of The Athletic, who covers Ohio State, to break down this matchup against Georgia that everybody's looking forward to. Hey, Cameron, thanks for joining me.
Not a problem. I appreciate you having me on.
So CJ Stroud says that he doesn't want to call the team underdogs per se, but that he feels like Georgia is counting them out. Do you think that that's accurate?
No, I don't think Georgia's counting them out. I think anytime you have the name Ohio State, I think it's hard for any opponent to count you out. I think Georgia knows they have a really good team coming in against with Ohio State. And to be fair, I think Ohio State probably has more talent at the skill positions than Georgia. So I think Georgia knows that they have to play one of their best games to beat a very, very talented Ohio State team. I do think Ohio State probably underdogs. I think people expect Georgia to win this game. But I don't think Georgia's counting Ohio State out of this one yet.
From what you know about CJ Stroud, I mean, this is a guy that is obviously projected as a top quarterback in the country. Does he play with that kind of chip on his shoulder? I mean, does he have that mentality? I know that I read that he mentioned that he said people have counted me out before. I mean, is this sort of active bulletin board material ahead of a matchup like this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, CJ, if you remember right, CJ wasn't a highly recruited kid to start out his high school career. He's kind of picked up towards kind of later in his high school career. So I think he's been a guy who people have told him one way or the other that he wouldn't succeed. And even now, like I think people can still continue to tell CJ that he's good in one thing, not good in the other, that he won't be able to succeed, that he can't win a big game. I think this is a big game for him. It's a legacy game for him. He hasn't played in a playoff game. He hasn't beat Michigan in the last 2 years. He hasn't won a Big Ten championship game. So this will be a big game for him in terms of his whole legacy at Ohio State as well.
Is it surprising to you that people are still sort of critical of his performance with what we've seen so far this season?
Sometimes. I think CJ's been great this year. I think in terms of a passer, I think he's probably the best pure passer in the country right now. I think more so sometimes when people critique him, it's in terms of what he may be in the NFL. They would critique, can he run the ball? Can he improvise against the blitz? He struggled against pressure at times this year. So I think when people critique him, it's more so of what will he be at the next level. I think people understand that he's one of the best quarterbacks in the country, deserves to be at the Heisman, deserves to be a first-round pick in this April. But what are his flaws and deficiencies, and has he gotten better at those? I think it's been the biggest question.
It seems like it's so hard to draft a quarterback in the NFL these days. Even a first-round pick or a second-round pick isn't necessarily guaranteed. I do want to talk about both of these sort of high-powered offenses, and you mentioned that Ohio State might even outmatch Georgia in terms of the specific weapons that they have. But because you mentioned the fact that CJ Stroud has struggled under pressure, Georgia's defense obviously has been impressive all season long. I think that's probably the calling card, even though they have a pretty impressive offense as well. How do you view the way that Ohio State matches up against Georgia's defense?
Yeah, it's actually pretty impressive. One of my colleagues, Seth Emerson, who covers Georgia, mentioned to me yesterday that you go back to 2017, this is the best. Ohio State has the best offense in the FBS since 2017. Georgia has the best defense in the FBS since 2017. So, like, you're looking at a legitimately historic matchup between the best offense and best defense, and it could go either way. I think Ohio State has the talent, the athleticism, the speed on the outside. I mean, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the best receiver in the country. I think Emeka Egbuka is a guy who's, I think, sometimes very overlooked. Julian Fleming. Ohio State has some injuries at running back, but I think they have the talent to put up a lot of points. The question is, one, can they protect CJ Stroud? And for me, it's what Ohio State offense do we get, if that makes sense. They put up a lot of points, but then sometimes you get the offense that scored 3 points in the second half against Michigan. Can they just kind of play calm, play relaxed, and just trust their weapons? I mean, they have a lot of NFL guys on that side of the ball. Can they trust them to go get the job done?
Who's the X factor in terms of making sure that Stroud is protected? This thing could get ugly or out of hand pretty quick if the pressure's too much and, he takes a couple sacks early, all of a sudden they're in trouble. I mean, Who are those guys that they're going to really rely on to make sure that he faces as little pressure as possible?
Yeah, I mean, I think Ohio State has 2 NFL tackles. I think Paris Johnson's a top 10 pick in April. I think he's the best tackle in the country. I think he's tremendous. DeJuan Jones is another one on the right side who's really good, who'd probably be in the NFL. But I think the key to them is going to be in the middle. Georgia has so much talent on the interior of its defensive line. Their center, Luke Whippler, will be, I mean, probably, if not the most important person on the offensive line, probably right behind whoever's first, because he has to direct traffic. He has to make sure things are picked up in the interior. He has to make sure he's calling out blitzes. So I think Luke Whipple has to have a really good game. He's been really good this year. I think he has an NFL career ahead of him as well. So if he has a good game, I think Ohio State could have some success.
It's not the sexiest thing to say that the game's going to be won in the trenches.
Yeah.
A lot of times, honestly, a lot of times it is, particularly in a matchup like this. Is that where your focus is going to be in terms of what could be the turning point or the difference maker? Or are you looking at some of those outside weapons, a receiver or running back that you think is going to be the X factor going into the game?
No, I think it is a trenches. I think Emeka Egbuka, Ohio State's number 2 receiver, could be a big factor. He's just so versatile. He takes kicks and punts. He plays outside. He plays in the slot. He'll even take some handoffs at times. He's huge, but I think you're right. I think it is in the trenches. I was actually just finished a story that Ohio State, I think, is 5th in the country in pressure rate allowed. Georgia's number 2 in the country. So you have 2 elite offensive lines in this game going against 2 really, really good defensive lines. So I think whichever team is able to get pressure on the quarterback a little bit more, I don't think you're going to see either quarterback running for their life all game. Both offensive lines are too good for that, but it's going to be timely pressure. Which one of these defenses can get that timely pressure and do it without sending 6, 7, 8 guys, without sacrificing some on the back end?
What's the team saying ahead of the matchup, just where they are mentally?
I think they're good. They're confident. There was a worry after the Michigan game that they'd be 2 down, but I think the second they saw themselves in the college football playoff, I think they feel rejuvenated. They say a lot that it's a second lease on life, that now they have a chance to do what they've wanted all along, even though they lost to Michigan. So, and I think you asked a lot of people before the season, this was supposed to be the national championship game. It was supposed to be Georgia versus Ohio State. So if you want to win the national championship, you have to beat the best team. So Ohio State, I think they're just really kind of relishing this opportunity to go up against Georgia.
What would you say, Cameron, covering the team, to those who feel like they backdoored their way into the college football playoff with the loss to Michigan, and maybe there's another team that's more deserving?
Yeah, I think
Alabama.
Yeah. It's hard to say. It's hard to say there's teams more talented than Ohio State. You look at this team up and down. I think that they have the talent to be a college football playoff team, and then you look at their schedule and what they did all year. Open the year with a big win against Notre Dame. A Notre Dame team that struggled early but got a lot better as the year went on. You go to Penn State and won there, and then I guess the criticism is that the Big Ten is Ohio State and Michigan, and that's it. But Ohio State took care of everything it could have all year going into the Michigan game. You don't want to get blown out at home. I would have been fine if they stayed out had USC won the Pac-12 championship. That's an argument. USC deserved to be in. But if you're going to try to put a 2-win team in over Ohio State, I don't think anyone else deserved to be in other than Ohio State right now.
So, I guess a lot of fans would be looking forward to maybe a potential matchup with Michigan in the national championship game, but I imagine that they're not overlooking an opponent like Georgia. That kind of speaks for itself. There's no trap here. This is going to be a really formidable test. What do you ultimately forecast for what we're going to see in this game? I know you cover Ohio State, but you cover all of college football. You know how talented Georgia is. 2 high-powered offenses, and we've discussed Georgia's defense. What do you sort of see happening?
Yeah, it's tough. The things Georgia does offensively is that when you expect them to do one thing, they do another. And it's really hard to pigeonhole what they're going to do. I expect them to try to establish the run against Ohio State. I think there's the criticism that Ohio State's not as physical as some of the other elite teams. So I think Georgia may try to impose their will early on Ohio State. I disagree with that criticism. I think Ohio State this year has taken a significant step up from where they were last year in terms of the physicality, especially on the defensive line. But I think Georgia may try to run the ball, and then I think they're going to trust Stetson Bennett. He's been their guy all year. He was at the Heisman finalist. He was finalist ceremony for a reason. I think they're going to trust him to win the game for them. Ohio State's going to have to get pressure on them. I don't think they're going to blitz a ton. They have a lot of talent on defensive line, especially at the edge rushing position. So I think they're going to try to get pressure on him and make him a little uncomfortable. On the flip side, I think Ohio State is going to be Ohio State. They're a spread team. They have a lot of talent on the outside. They're going to trust C.J. Stroud to make the right decisions, the right reads. The one thing that Ohio State needs to do, and maybe this comes down to Coach Ryan Day, is I think you just have to let C.J. Stroud loose. I mean, there's no more confining him to the pocket. Like if he needs a scramble, you let him go. He has to be the guy to go win you this game. And for Georgia defensively, I think that, like, it begins with their defensive line. They're really, really good there. They don't have to blitz a lot because they have so many talented guys. It's just can they get enough pressure on CJ to speed him up a little bit? And I think that'll be the key.
Really a compelling story when you think about both quarterbacks' paths to get here. I mean, Stetson Bennett, like you mentioned, this is a guy who also has that kind of underdog mentality, a veteran by age and, by experience, and who also has been counted out before. How much does that count? I mean, if this game really does come down to which of those two is going to execute best, how much does that mentality count?
I don't know. I mean, I think more so what will count more is just the experience they both have. I mean, Stetson's already won a national championship. He's trying to go for a second straight. He's probably the most experienced quarterback of all the 4 quarterbacks here right now. And then CJ has been in big games. He beat Notre Dame, but he didn't beat Oregon last year. He hasn't beat Michigan yet. So I think for him, it's going to be a case of staying calm and not trying to press for that big win. He has experience. He's won games at Ohio State before, beaten good teams with Ohio State. He just has to get over this hump, and I think that'll be a big thing for him.
Is the game being played in Atlanta? I mean, that's not a home game per se, but it's not too far away. How big a factor do you think that will ultimately be?
I just think it'd be familiarity for Georgia. The Peach Bowl executives have talked a lot about they think this game will be closer to 50-50 than people think in terms of fan. Ohio State has fans everywhere, and it's not that far of a trip. The only thing that might put a damper in it is travel because of the snowstorm that was up in Ohio over the weekend. And then there's still some travel delays in terms of flights out of Columbus and things of that nature. But Ohio State fans are everywhere. They'll drive if they need to. They'd walk to Atlanta if they really had to be at this game. So I think the fan it'll be a lot of Ohio State fans there. I think more than anything, like I said, it's just Georgia being more familiar with the Mercedes-Benz Stadium and everything that goes into being in Atlanta.
When you're given a second chance to get into the college football playoff, is there this attitude among the players or the coaching staff that they have nothing to lose, or that, they sort of belong here regardless? What is not the bulletin board material, because I know we kind of already talked about that, but what is the mindset, the mantra heading into this game about the fact that they were on the outside looking in and are ultimately here in this moment?
Yeah, it's kind of weird because you're Ohio State. So, you expect to be in the college football playoff. You expect to compete for national championships. But at the same time, there are people who already wrote you off after you lost to Michigan. So, what do you have to lose to come in here and put it all out there? This is Georgia going for its back-to-back championships. They have more to lose than you do. So I don't. There's always pressure when you play for Ohio State and when you coach for Ohio State. But I think it is a little bit less knowing we weren't supposed to be here. Let's just go out here and leave it all on line and see what happens. Now I say that you lose or you get blown out, and then Columbus goes crazy because they didn't win a national championship. So it's Ohio State. There's always pressure. But I think you have a point that they weren't supposed to be here. You can kind of go out there and just play loose and see what happens.
I think you mentioned Williams, who is dealing with a cold. Correct me if I'm wrong. What's the status with the running back? Is he going to be?
Yeah. We don't know. It's hard. It's always a mystery here at Ohio State. Mayan Williams had a foot injury most of the year. He kind of took a week off, played. He kind of switched off with Travion Henderson. He's expected to be full go this week. I was supposed to talk to the media on Tuesday, and Chip Traynham, his backup running back, said that Mayan was just under the weather. He was not at the portion of practice that was open. He was not there today. But I don't know if he came in after the media left, or if they were just holding him out. We don't know if it's actually because he's sick or if it's actually because he still has a lingering foot issue. But anyone you ask has said that he's practiced well. So I think people are expecting him to play on Saturday. And until told otherwise, I kind of expect that as well. I don't think a sickness is going to keep him out of the college football playoff. If he doesn't play, it's because he's hurt.
How big of a deal would that be if they didn't have him available?
Yeah, it'd be huge. You're already losing Travion Henderson. Evan Pryor's already been out for the year with a knee injury, so you'd only have 2 scholarship running backs. One is a true freshman and Down Hayden, who has been pretty good this year. He ran for over 100 yards against Indiana and Maryland. And then you have Chip Traynham, who was a running back at Arizona State last year, transferred to Ohio State and was a linebacker until the Iowa game, which I think was week 5 this year, and then moved back to running back. So you'd only have 2 scholarship running backs. It would be tough. Ohio State really needs a healthy Maya Williams to really establish his running game. They can't just plan to go out there and throw the ball against Georgia. You have to at least establish some sort of a run game to keep them honest.
And defensively, where are they weakest, would you say?
Definitely a corner. They're not very deep at corner. I think they have one really good corner in Denzel Burke, but they do tend to give up big plays. They tend to give us some pass interference calls and one-on-one coverage sometimes. I think the group is solid. Cameron Brown's another one. J.K. Johnson, Jair Brown's a freshman who's played good at times, but they've just been too inconsistent there. They're really strong at safety. I think they're strong in the middle at linebacker, and we've talked about the defensive line, but the corners have to be on their game on Saturday because they've just been inconsistent at times this year.
Is it a group of corners that are capable of, turning in the kind of performance against the offense that Georgia has? I know you mentioned the inconsistency. I mean, are they a good enough group to potentially hold down the fort, so to speak, if they're playing well?
Yeah, it's a talented group. And I think one thing that helps them is that, like I said, they're not deep, but the defense they play in the 4-2-5 is they don't play a lot of corners. They play more safeties. So they usually only play 2 corners at a time. And they play safety as a nickel. So they don't have to run a lot of them out there. So they can kind of rotate and stay fresh. They're talented. They're just a really talented group. They just sometimes have tendency to make the mistake in the biggest moment, a third down pass interference call, and then you get a touchdown drive. Some of those things happen. So, and Denzel Burke has been great the back half of the year. So they have the talent to do it. It's just a matter of can they execute in the biggest moments?
Yeah, that sends a shiver, I'm sure, down Ohio State fans' spine when you talk about corners that absolutely must play well. They just have a habit of not showing up when it matters the most, like against Georgia. Just before I let you go, I've kept you for too long already, but what are some of the other key matchups that we haven't talked about that you're keying in on that you think could ultimately make the difference?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is Marvin Harrison Jr. against the Georgia secondary. Really the Ohio State receiving core against the Georgia secondary. They have to. I think whoever wins that matchup will have a good hand in winning the game. Ohio State has so much speed and so much talent there. If Georgia makes one mistake, it can lead to a touchdown. And then on the flip side, I really think it's Ohio State, the interior of Ohio State's defensive line. They're not gonna wreak havoc. They're not gonna get a ton of tackles and a ton of tackles for loss, but they have to suck up double teams to allow Ohio State's linebackers to come in and stop the run. If they can keep Georgia behind the sticks in the run game, that'll give them more chances to get after Stetson Bennett and move him around the pocket a little bit more and make him uncomfortable. So the interior of that Ohio State defensive line will be crucial on Saturday as well.
Cameron Teague, really appreciate the time and your insight. I know it's going to be a game that a lot of people are looking forward to, and the stakes could not be higher. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.